Hello, my name is Matt Ginsberg. I'm the CEO of Connected Signals, and I'm going to be showing you how to install our V2If city appliance so that you can push your traffic light data to us. This is the box it comes in, and in the box you should find a dongle, which you'll need to adapt to plug in an Ethernet cable, a power supply, the V2If appliance itself, and instructions. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through the instructions while you watch so that you can see how everything works. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to set it up so that you can inspect what's on the V2If device from your computer and configure it appropriately. To do this and to complete the installation, you're going to need 2 Ethernet cables. These are not supplied. You'll need to supply your own. The biggest reason we didn't supply them is we don't know how big to make them. So you'll need 2 Ethernet cables, one to connect it to the switch connecting to your traffic lights, and one to connect it initially to your computer and eventually to the internet. So the first thing you do is you take the V2If and plug it in. So here's the power supply. One end goes to power, and the other connects to the micro USB port on the bottom of the V2If itself. You then take one of the 2 Ethernet cables, plug one end into the V2If, and plug the other end into your computer. Now what you have to do is you have to actually tell your computer that instead of talking to the normal Ethernet, it's talking to the V2If device. So you go to your computer, you open your network preferences. It's going to be a little bit different if it's a Mac or a Windows machine. And what you want to do is you want to configure your network manually, and you want it connected to 192.168.17.1, and you want to use a subnet mask of 255.255.0.0. So I'm doing that, and I clicked apply. Okay, and now that I'm connected to it, the next thing I want to do is I want to actually look at the V2If device in a browser. So I'm going to go open up a browser, and in the address window, I'm going to type http://192.168.17.42, which is the address at which the V2If device is located. And it should pop up the home screen, and what mine is currently showing is that I have successfully connected to the V2If configuration utility. The V2If has a valid configuration, and when I started, those are the only 2 things that were successful, but now it is also saying that V2If can establish an outgoing UDP connection to connected signals. You might get that, you might not get that, depending upon how your network is actually configured. The next thing I have to do is I actually have to establish the traffic light information that the device needs and the address to which it's sending the information. So on the V2If home screen, I go to the Configuration tab, and I have to give it a remote host and a remote port. We've already set it up for you so that the remote host is gdsignals.imagreen driver.com using port 2012 and UDP as the protocol. UDP is outbound only, which means that we're not going to even be acknowledging the packets. Nothing comes back into your network. Everything is just flowing outward to us. In some cases, you might need to configure the remote host with a static IP address because your domain is configured so that you need one. In that case, the static IP address to use is in the instructions. Having done that, I submit it, and I have to restart my signal server to take those changes. The next thing I have to do is I have to actually tell the V2If device which traffic light is associated with which IP address. Your switch allows your TMS to communicate with your traffic lights, and each traffic light has a unique IP address that you've assigned, but the information that we want isn't what IP address, but the actual traffic light ID, so that we can know, for example, that this particular piece of information was sent by the traffic light on 3rd and Broadway or wherever it happens to be. So what you need to do is you need to actually create a CSV file that has all of the information relating the traffic lights to their IP addresses and upload that into the V2If device. If you go to 192.168.17.42/API/V1 /devices.csv, you'll see a sample file. And you can download that from your web browser, open it in Excel or whatever spreadsheet manager you want, and modify that to include all the information that we actually need. After you've made the appropriate modifications, you go back to the V2If configuration screen, and you select that file via the browser, and you eventually get to the file you want, and at that point you just click Upload File. And after you upload the file, you should see all of the IP addresses and your city ID and the traffic light ID in the information that has been uploaded into the V2If device. And now the V2If device is ready to connect to your switch and to connect to your network. What's actually happening at your switch is that the TMS is sending queries typically to the various traffic lights, and they're responding. And what we need to do is V2If needs to listen to that traffic as it goes by. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a switch, and on your switch there are multiple ports. So here, for example, you can see a couple of ports are already connected, and what we've done is we've set this up so that a traffic light is actually talking to this switch at the moment, and there's traffic for us to listen to. And what you need to do is you need to mirror one of these ports, in our case it's port number 5, to another port. And we're going to plug the V2If into this other port, and it's going to see all the traffic going back and forth between your TMS and the traffic lights. So the first piece of this is to set your switch up so that it mirrors, in my case, everything from port 5 to port 3. How you do that is dependent on the maker of your switch, and if you look at the V2If instructions, we send you to a website where you can find out how to do that. The instructions are very different for each switch, so we're not going to show you that happening, but you'll be able to configure your switch. And if you run into trouble, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us and we'll walk you through it. So the next step is to connect the switch to the V2If device and make sure that the packets are flowing properly. So having set the switch up to mirror everything to port 3, I'm going to take my second Ethernet cable, plug it into port 3. The other end of the cable goes into the dongle that's supplied with the V2If device, and then the dongle plugs into any of the ports on the side of the V2If, any of the USB ports on the side of the V2If device. And after you plug it in, you have to go to the home screen and reboot the V2If device. The V2If device will take a couple of minutes to reboot. You can tell if it's rebooted by reloading the page corresponding to the home screen, and once that comes back up, you know it's working again. After it's working, go to the configuration screen. Right now, you're trying to send packets to us, to connected signals, but they're not going to go because you may not be connected to a machine that's connected to the internet or that's appropriately configured. So on the configuration screen, where it says remote host, switch that from gdsignals.imagreendriver.com to 192.168.17.1. That tells V2If to send the information not to us, but just to this computer. After you make that switch, click Submit. After you click Submit, restart the signal feed, which is right next to it. And now if you go back to the home screen, it's going to take a while, but eventually you'll see the top 4 boxes should be checked. And the V2If is now receiving and decoding NTCP packets. Once you know that it's working, go back to the configuration screen and put back in gdsignals.imagreendriver.com, click Submit, and restart the signal feed. At this point, everything is basically ready to connect to us, and you're ready for the last step. The last step is, instead of the V2If talking to this computer, you actually want it to send the information to us. So you've got a cable running from the Ethernet port on the V2If device to the Ethernet port on your computer. Unplug it and plug it back in to the Ethernet, and then the V2If device will function as it should, and it'll start sending information to us. The one last thing you have to do is you have to make sure that the data coming out of the V2If device actually comes to us. So this Ethernet cable can plug in outside your firewall, inside your firewall, in your DMZ, anywhere, but you have to make sure that the UDP packets that are being created actually can make their way to us. So if you have plugged this back in inside your firewall, please configure your firewall so that UDP packets will indeed be allowed to flow out to the address that we have given you. And that should do it. At this point, if you're kind enough to get in touch with us, we can confirm for you that we are receiving the information as expected, and everything should go fairly easily. Thank you very much.